Thank you. I'd like to start with the Deputy Mayor, please. Deputy Mayor, the Mayor's manifesto pledge, and I'll read it to you so you're absolutely sure of it. I'll continue to ensure the Met is able to effectively respond to public, including maintaining a 24-hour police front office counter in every borough. The new Met for London said, Londoners will be able to more easily contact us, whether by phone, digitally, or face-to-face. Each borough will have at least one 24/7 front counter. Now, that's what the Police and Crime Commissioner, our Mayor, said. You're the Deputy Mayor. What do you have to say to that?
I think the Police and Crime Plan rightly talks about the importance of access to Londoners, and I think, as Mark has given in detail, in the context of seriously constrained budgets, which have developed over a decade of underfunding of the police, we know it's been a theme of the committee time and time again that in that context that there has to be prioritisation, and that prioritisation, I strongly believe, should be going to neighbourhood policing.
Yes.
And I welcome the fact that the Met has looked at the issues of front counter in great detail, has engaged with particularly groups like we've spoken about in this committee, who are.
Let's try and keep to what I've actually asked you. You're moving away from the subject. The Mayor, and you talk about the last decade, he has been the Mayor now for 9 years. He does have a £21 billion budget per year. His most important thing is to keep Londoners safe. The only reason the Commissioner is having to do this is because he's got a £260 million black hole, and I know Labour love talking about black holes. Well, that's his that he's having to deal with. The Mayor, only a couple of years ago, less than that, was saying that we would have a 24-hour police front office counter in every borough. Why was he saying that? He must have known there was no way that he could actually commit to that.
The Mayor has, throughout his term, increased the amount of money that goes into policing. 25% of the Mayor's, of the police's budget now comes directly from the mayoral budget. We recognise that after decades of austerity and underfunding from previous governments, that the government itself came into a budget that was a lot worse than they initially thought, which has meant that the funding...
For 9 years. 9 years he's been in charge. He spends money frivolously on everything else. You could actually say to him, as the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, we need more money in the police. You only have to listen to the Commissioner saying that we're losing officers in intelligence, in forensics, in firearms, in the Royal Parks. Schools officers are going. We are losing all of those. The Commissioner is saying that it's a reduced size business, if you like. We can't afford to have a reduced size police service. We have got increasing numbers all the time, and I will say it to the Commissioner. I was at a Safer Neighbourhood team meeting last night, and the residents there were all saying people just don't report crime anymore. And it's going to be even more difficult for them because of the front counters. So have you actually asked the Mayor to put more of his money, his part of his £21 billion budget, have you asked him to put yet more money into the police service?
Every year, the Mayor prioritises the police within his budget. That's why the funding has increased to the police's budget of 25 to counter some of the previous government's cuts. Equally, the Mayor has lobbied alongside myself very hard to the Home Office to do all that they can to increase the funding to government, and will continue to do that. That's why we saw record investment in police funding last year. That's why, on top of the money we originally got, we got an additional 32 million, which we strongly directed not only into neighbourhood policing but into public protection and a continued reformation on standards and culture.
Yes, don't let's forget that some of the additional money was to pay for the increase in national insurance contributions that the Labour government put in. So are you quite comfortable then that within less than 2 years that the Mayor promises 24-hour police front office counters in every borough? Are you quite relaxed then that this has been gone back on? Because it's not long ago he promised this. You're quite relaxed, are you, that he makes promises that he clearly knew he couldn't keep?
The Mayor has prioritised neighbourhood policing. That's why when the additional money came in, he made sure that additional 935 frontline officers were ring-fenced from the savings. He prioritises making sure that Londoners have the neighbourhood policing that they have long cried for, and that is increasing access to policing. The issue of front counters is definitely a difficult one, but it's a difficult one made in constrained finances. I welcome the conversations that we have had here, the conversations that have directly happened between the police and stakeholders, especially those with protected characteristics, has led to an increase on the ability to have access to front counters across London. It's not ideal. It's a tough choice. We're trying to balance a difficult budget.
3,300 officers we're losing. Do you reckon that won't make any difference at all?
I think, obviously, the less officers mean difficult choices, but as you've heard directly from the Commissioner, it's about prioritisation and making sure that we have the most effective police force possible, and that police force is working on things that matter to Londoners. We've heard the really important statistics on homicide, burglary, public protection, phone theft and robbery.
Yeah, and
it's going in the right direction, and that's why we're working so hard.
And we're also hearing that we're losing
further.
Intelligence officers, firearms officers, forensic officers, Royal Parks officers, school officers. We're listening to all of that. Well, you're obviously comfortable with the fact that the Mayor has made promises and he's not prepared to put his hand in his pocket to bail the police out, the Metropolitan Police out. Shame on him. Our Metropolitan Police are so important to all of us to keep us safe. I'll move on to the Commissioner now. Before I start on this, Commissioner, can I just say that I'm thrilled that the Whiskey 80, that's the case when that poor officer, had to go through 10 years before he was told that there was no case to answer. And I'm mortified that the Chris Carber firearms officer has got another year to wait before, hopefully, the situation goes in the same way. It's totally unacceptable. I don't know if you want to comment on that before I go on to the front counters.
Thank you. I'd like to briefly comment on that. We can all empathise with a family who lost somebody in the police shooting, regardless of what his activities were. That's tragic for that family. Officers expect and embrace accountability, but it should be swift and proportionate. It'll be 10 years in December since the incident in December 2015 when officers responding to intelligence regarding a planned breakout of a criminal gang trying to break a criminal out of custody on his way to a Crown Court. That Jermaine Baker was shot by Whiskey 80. Of course, there's going to be investigations that follow and an inquest. That's right and proper. But to have had a long-running criminal investigation, then an inquest where he was told that he left the inquest with his integrity and his reputation intact, and it was a lawful killing, and then years later to be forced onto a misconduct hearing, which was found no case to answer halfway through. I meet officers in these situations. The effect on them and their family of having this hanging over them for years and years is not acceptable, and it's the chilling effect not just on the most acute cases such as deaths, but on other incidents where the fact police officers get investigated. If they are pursuing a criminal and a criminal crashes, the police officer gets investigated.
I know.
All of these issues together sort of have a chilling effect on the confidence of officers to confront criminals in the way we'd expect.
Of course it does, and it seems to get worse and worse. I know my colleagues are going to talk about specific closures. Obviously, I'm not happy about Harrow. I won't go into it because it'll be replicated around the table. My other colleague, Assemblymember Duval, did mention these rape gangs. I agree with you. I've been very fortunate. I've had quite a few people contact me, and I've seen them, victims of these rape gangs. I agree with you. They're the perpetrators, as it were, from every single background. I hope the Mayor knows what a rape gang is now. Perhaps you'll tell him, Deputy Mayor, if he doesn't. But I do hope that we do look into this, because these girls are broken. It's going to affect them for absolutely ever. So many people are putting obstacles in the way of doing these investigations, and at some point this has got to be looked at. There is no way this is not happening in London. I've spoken to too many of these victims. I hope at some point we come back to this. I accept now we're talking about front counters, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you just said to my colleague that you were dealing with years of cuts to the Met's budget from government. Could you just tell me in what year the Met's budget was cut by government under Sadiq Khan?
It's not necessarily about a reduction in budget. It's
well,
about
that's what you just said, and I've pulled you up on this before. Okay, words are important. You can't say a cut in the Met's budget when there's been a 32% increase under the Met. No, you said a cut in the Met's budget. So unless you can point to a year, and I'll give you the answer, you can't. Unless you can point to a year in which the budget was cut to the Met by government, you cannot say that.
I think the point is that if you underfund year on year in the face of increasing demand, the Commissioner has outlined the difficult decisions that has had to happen year on year throughout that period. So we're talking
about an underfunding that the Commissioner has highlighted under government. So we are highlighting an underfunding that the Commissioner has highlighted under previous governments and the current government. You are accusing the previous government of cuts which never happened. Words are important. We can talk about appropriate levels of funding and underfunding, but you were making the assumption that there'd been a cut. There hasn't been a cut. So we should correct the record on that.
I definitely used the term underfunding.
No, you didn't. But luckily these meetings are recorded, so you can go back and look at it. But look, I do want to get back onto the substantial item for today and on the front counters. Obviously, I can't hide the fact that I'm seething. There's no way to cut this where Chingford isn't the fall guy. And I don't know, I mean, out of the 5 boroughs, everyone is feeling hard done by, right? But I seriously can't find a way to cut this under your data-led exercise, which doesn't show that this is an anomaly to be closing Chingford. So, Deputy Mayor, to come to you first, you've already told us, we've already established, you have no idea how many people use police stations. You have no idea who uses police stations. You have no idea why they use police stations. You have no idea the crimes they report at police stations and what the crimes are. That data was all collected in 2017 in the last round of cuts to police stations. Why did you not demand that you were given that data to help make these decisions and advocate for the right stations staying open this time?
I clarified at the last committee that you were told directly by AC Twist that the Met doesn't collect data on wider footfall. It collects data on reporting. We have definitely asked questions in relation to having updated data, especially on crime type, especially on finance, especially on IQI data. We didn't want to go into decisions in 2025 based on 2017 data. That's why we asked for more information, and that based on our asking for that information, based on the engagement that's been done, based on follow-up questions that I've asked from the Met on the latest proposals, we are doing all we can to scrutinise these decisions that are having to be made in challenging financial times.
I don't think you understood the question. I asked why that data was collected for a specific purpose, because stations, they were looking at front counter closures, right? That scenario has repeated itself, and that data has not been collated. I'm asking why you didn't ask for that data. You're telling me you've gone away and had those conversations, but I don't think that you have, because I don't think you can answer any of those questions for me still, can you? You can't tell me how many people use stations. You can't tell me why they use stations. You can't tell me the types of crimes that are being reported, and you can't tell me the types of people that were relying on that service.
I can ask the Metropolitan Police for data on the areas. I have written to the committee on the back of the request last time, but I can't count things that aren't counted for me. I can only ask, this is an operational decision. This is decisions made on the data that the Commissioner has in front of him on the rationale from the original proposal that we talked about in the previous months to this. I know through the pushing from our own teams and other factors that more data has become available, and on the latest proposal I've gone back and asked more questions. I think it's important that the decisions, whilst in this really difficult constrained context, have to be made to make a balanced budget, that they are the best decisions possible.
And you're missing the point that in 2017 these were data-driven decisions, and in 2025 they are not data-driven decisions. So I'll come back to the point you've made just then as well, to distance yourself and the Mayor from this. Why on earth was the Mayor making a manifesto pledge to keep a station open 24/7 if it had nothing to do with him?
As I've said previously, the Mayor's number one priority is keeping Londoners safe. And that's why he prioritises neighbourhood policing and access. That's why he's invested in Met Engage.
No, Deputy Mayor, we don't have time for you to answer the questions you want to answer. If the Mayor has no control over the decision to close front counters, why would he promise to keep them open?
The Mayor has, that's why through the prioritisation of the £32 million has worked alongside the Met to give 2.2 million additional money to make sure that access is still available. However, in the context, as previously said, of getting a worse settlement from the Home Office because of the previous mismanagement of finances by previous government, we are in a situation where there is a gap in the budget of the Metropolitan Police, and in that context, these tough choices, which we've been talking about for a year, is being made. But I think it's right that in that context, the Mayor has prioritised neighbourhood policing and access. So the Mayor does have so the Mayor does have some priority. Then the Mayor can make this have influenced this decision, or he can't? The Mayor, in the allocation of his budget, which is the Metropolitan's overall budget, obviously makes sure that the things that matter to Londoners, this is the reason why MOPAC does all of the insight and research it does, is to understand the priorities of Londoners. The Londoners have said time and time again that neighbourhood policing.
So I don't want to take up the Committee's time, but I have got questions to get through, and it's just a simple question. Can the Mayor influence which stations are open or not?
No, that's an operational decision.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Sorry,
Assembly Member Best, you've asked a number of questions, and we've got a list of people to go through.
Assembly Member has had a long time. I need to answer my question to the Commissioner.
Best, I'm moving on to Assembly Member Roberts. You've asked a number of questions now. Assembly Member Roberts.
I actually haven't, compared to Assembly Member Deval. I've taken a lot less time.
Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions about powers and guidance. First of all, Commissioner, you frequently make the point that you obviously have to operate within the law and with the powers and so on that Parliament gives you. One of the things that Parliament's been very clear about is that we don't have a blasphemy law in this country. They removed it, and the Prime Minister recently was asked to bring one in and said that he did not intend to do so. Obviously, there's a concern that public order powers are being used potentially to create a kind of de facto blasphemy law where the police and the courts are enforcing sort of public order in that way. Recent prominent example in London, of course, was Hamit Koskan outside the Turkish embassy, who was arrested for what, on the face of it, appears to be probably an offensive but ultimately non-violent one-man protest. Was that a proportionate response to arrest him for that?
I think it was. I mean, clearly we'll reflect on the court's judgment. There is not a blasphemy law, and we definitely don't want to recreate one. Our laws are that these laws are contextual. If you want to criticise, the tenets of any faith, that is within your freedom of speech to be able to do that in most situations. If you want to do it by screaming in the face of someone of that faith as they're walking out, out of their faith building on a day of religious observance, then that may well look like and present as certainly a breach of the peace in terms of what you're trying to stir up violence and potentially threatening behaviour or other criminal offences. So you're looking at the intent behind it. We are not criminalising people who have an opinion about a faith or anything else. But if someone's trying to incite violence, that goes beyond what freedom of speech is about. And that's the judgment we're trying to make, which goes down to context, which are very fine lines, and the courts will put cases before the courts. We thought that one was worthy of an arrest. CPS thought it was worthy of prosecution. The court thought on the facts on that day it wasn't made out. And we will wrestle with those difficult lines of the law again and again.
So, to be clear, that was the Turkish embassy, though, not a religious building. But
my point was
but
a general
is there something
one.
about the man with the knife that makes that situation violent that then reflects on the protester? Is that what you're saying?
So it's about the context. So I was making a general point. That time you've got outside a sort of largely sort of the embassy of a largely Muslim country, and the view that was taken by the officers was that was beyond criticising a faith, and that was intended to incite violence. CPS took the same view. The court, in the end, decided on the facts of the case that wasn't made out. That's what the process is about. But we are not going to be routinely arresting people who criticise a faith. We are going to when it's done in an exceptional way where it looks like it's intended to stir up violence.
Okay. On to the new powers that are currently being looked at in Parliament. What impact would those have on policing protests in London, and would you as the Met be prepared to make use of those new powers that are being looked at in Parliament?
So are you referring to the recent comments by the Home Secretary?
Yes.
So she's considering, I think, what sort of review and what she wants to look at. So until I know precisely what she's thinking or what that review says, I think I'm sort of guessing and making things up. So I don't think I can answer that.
I mean, one of the discussions, for example, would be looking at more powers to prevent a protest from occurring. Are there further powers in that area that you think would be useful? And I suppose I would add that are actually operational. You know, if you've got 10,000 people, it's very hard to tell them all to go home without creating a situation if they don't want to.
Yeah, so clearly the Home Secretary is troubled by the fact of the cumulative impact on communities, which we can all see the effect of that, and entirely makes sense. If new proposals come forward, then of course we'll have a conversation with the Home Office about the practicality of them and sort of what is and isn't operationally achievable. I think that sometimes we will say to government, we think this bit of the law doesn't work. And, for example, we had this recently with knife crime where the zombie knife legislation didn't work. I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to do that. On something which is as fundamental and political as the balance about how much protest takes place with the right to ban it, that's not for us to have a view on other than the practicality of a policy. That's for government and eventually Parliament to decide on that balance. If I express a view on protest law should be more permissive or more restrictive, I think I'm overstepping my responsibilities. Okay,
no, that's fair. Some of the other powers suggested were things like abilities to target specific individuals who are sort of repeat protesters, if you like, frequent flyers, to specifically prohibit them, without doing something about a wider protest. Would that be a useful power?
I'm not going to be drawn on.
You don't want to get drawn into any of that.
See more of it.
Okay, so onto the guidance. College of Policing guidance on protesting. Do you think that's adequate and correct? Is there anything else that needs looking at within that College of Policing guidance?
It's not a challenging issue for us. I mean, their guidance reflects the national approaches and the tactics that they've built over a period of time, and the constantly changing area of law. So it's not a restrictive or problematic document at all. It's a helpful, compendium of everything we've learned.
It's Assembly Member Best. Did you want to come in?
Thank you. Commissioner, on the high standards and values, is there a risk with the closing off of more police stations to the public that they could become more enclaves of where these aren't public-facing, not customer-facing places, where you don't have that cultural challenge of knowing anyone could walk in at any point?
I don't think that's a significant risk. I think your question hints at a wider point. The openness to outside voices is a critical part of culture in the organisation. Kaya helpfully spoke about the independent custody visitors, and something that we've been working on together in the light of this actually is growing their number and their frequency of visits. So that's one simple example. Another piece of work we're doing with MOPAC is on our scrutiny of police use of powers and tactics, and we've got sort of quite a varied model across London that's evolved over time. We're trying to take the best of all of those, so we have more scrutiny of more use of tactics beyond stop and search to make sure that communities are expressing a view, and that's feeding into our training and learning and reflections. Obviously, we've got the London Policing Board, which the Mayor's appointed us to support him in his legal duties to hold me to account. So having the outside in, I think, is really important, and there's much more we can do on that. I don't think front counters really adds to that.
Okay, so it's good to hear that point, though, because when at our engagement event around the front counter issues, about 50 people came, there was 20 people online, and that was one of the real things, is having that openness to the station. So a lot of people did ward panels and things like that, and
Exactly.
What we were being told there is that that would cease to exist in the police station. But is that you're confirming that the police station will be open to continue those activities still?
But things like the regular ward panels are critical to making sure. So in terms of fighting crime in a neighbourhood, some of the right things to do we know from our data, but some of it comes from a local community telling us, actually, this might not be in your data, but we're worried about that issue or that group of people. So that needs to continue. The wider scrutiny at borough level that I've just spoken about needs to continue and be improved. So
communities will still be allowed to go in and hold meetings and speak to police officers in the police station?
Completely. But not all of those meetings take place in police stations, but where that's the best place to do it, of course, they're very welcome.
Okay. And the other thing that affects trust and is with the high standards and values is hearing things that are correct. At that meeting as well, we were told we would have a greater neighbourhood policing presence as a result of the front counter closures. But obviously, looking at your figures, it's hard to counterbalance how we're going to save £7 million yet have greater neighbourhood policing. Okay. So could you write to me with more details on that?
That may be either misquoted or slightly clumsy. What the person, I'm sure, is trying to say is we have put greater in and we're able to sustain it by making the cuts elsewhere. It would be easy to have taken resources away from neighbours saying, well, we put 1,000 in, we're now going to take 100 or whatever out to balance the books on this issue. But we know the thing that matters so much to Londoners are the dedicated PCSOs and police officers in wards who build the relationships, who know what the problem is, and are able to tackle the issues that matters most in that community. So having made that choice to push more in that direction, even in a shrinking organisation, we determined not to compromise it. And so that's why we're making these choices. And I'm sure that that officer or that staff member was simply trying to emphasise that by making choices elsewhere, we're sustaining the growth that we put down.
The point is similar to the one I made to the Deputy Mayor, right? Is words are important, so you can't tell a room full of people there's going to be more neighbourhood officers when there isn't. But
I think, can I ask you to be sort of slightly kinder with, we've got lots of officers across the Met who aren't used to engaging with politicians. Now, I don't mind having this conversation. They're simply trying to be practical in terms of explaining locally, look, we need to do this tough thing because we want to keep our neighbourhood teams and make them strong, etc. Now, if that comes out clumsily, then please give them a little margin for error.
I do, but at the same time, then you have people wanting to understand how we're making a budget cut and getting more neighbourhood officers. And I still don't understand because we haven't been provided with any figures. So if you could provide me with the figures,
Assemblymember Best,
really
we're actually talking about culture and misconduct. So I'm going to move on to Assemblymember Garbett.
I haven't. I was.
I'm moving on to Assemblymember Garbett.
Do you want me to ask the question that's on the?
I'm moving on to Assemblymember Garbett.
Okay. That's a no, then. So we don't want to ask.
Assemblymember Garbett.
I was literally about to ask the question that's here and you don't want to.
Assemblymember Garbett, please could you ask your question?